Hi there, this is another video for a Figma support forum request, this time on the concept of a knob. So how do we make, let's say, 128 sprites of a knob? So we will end up at the end of this video with an animation like this. This is coming from a plugin within Figma called Figmotion. And as well as this sort of animated video, we can use an external tool to then sort of separate this video into 128 frames, which we see here, 128 items selected, and each one the knob is moving around. Now, this is something I'm just sort of playing around with. There's probably a lot of ways to do this, but I'll go over how I set it up. So as you can see here in Figmotion, you can see all the frames that have been auto-generated, or tweened as they're sort of called in the animation space, tweened together between two endpoints. So our first point, the knob is here, and then our last point, the knob is right back sort of where it started, but it does one full loop around back to the 0 degree position. So let's go over how I made this. So first you're going to need two plugins, so I'll show you both of those. So the first plugin I used is called, obviously, Figmotion. So you can find that by searching Figmotion. And then the other one I use is called Chart. So Chart right here by Pavel Kuligin, 11.2K installs. There's also another one, but I'm using this one called Chart. So I'll show you what I did here. So the first thing, I'm going to make a new page here. So tutorial. So the first thing I did was use Chart. So I'm going to open my panel up here, plugins and Chart, and create Chart. It'll ask you for a layer, so you can create a simple frame, and then we'll open up with this panel here. So what I'll do is choose donut chart, and you can leave it on random. We can choose 128 slices or whatever you want. We're actually not really going to use chart to create all of our frames. We're going to use Figmotion for that. So you can really define anything you want here, but I'll do 64, for example, and your values, you just want to choose 1 and 1 for min max, and you can leave it on random. And as you can see, it'll create you this beautiful donut chart. So you could, consider each of these segments, which you can click on, as sort of a position in your knob animation. So we only did 64, so this wouldn't be your full 128, but you'll see what we do later. It won't really matter. I like this size better. So we can go within our donut chart group that it'll make. And as you can see, it put our frame in the group for some reason. So I'm going to drag that out, collapse this frame, and put the chart within the frame instead, which is what the plugin should do, but I think it's a early stage plugin. I'm going to resize my frame just to fit the whole chart in, and I might give it some padding here so you can see. So the first thing I would do is basically we only need one of these. So theoretically you could hide all your donut segments except for one. So I'm going to select them all and hit Control-Shift-H to hide them all. And as you can see here, we have one nice little segment. And if you double click on it, you should see these three little points. So one will give you the ratio, one will give you the sweep, and the start point. So as you can see, our start is at -90 degrees. So this is just a position in our 360 degree circle. So we can drag the start position to sort of drag our little slider guy all the way around. So you could do this manually, and you could adjust the start position 128 times if you have the time to do that. The only faster way I could find so far was using Figmotion. So first, let's drag these knobs until we get a size of our knob that we like. So we can adjust the sweep and the ratio to sort of change the sizing. So let's say we like something like that. We can do that, and we can position it. We can position our start. So we're just about in the center there. So for us, that's -94 degrees. And we can change our color as well. So we can make it this blue color. And we can also put sort of our background circle if we want. So we can draw an ellipse. So I'm holding Shift and Alt to keep it proportional. And then I'm just going to center it within our donut chart, just like that. Let's increase the size a little bit, and then make sure this appears below our chart in the panel. So we can drag that below our donut chart group, and we can make sure it's not being hidden, which it shouldn't be. For some reason, it's not showing up. Here, we'll do that. It's got to be in the same group. There we go. So it's, or sorry, within the frame. So it's within the frame. Our donut chart is above it. If we're happy with sort of the look of that, we can move on, but let's maybe make it a little bit bigger, just so we can see our knob a little more clearly. And now we can animate this. So the first thing we'll do is click this donut chart, and we'll open up our second plugin, which is called Figmotion. And it will give you two options. We just want to open Figmotion. Now just move your frames and your windows around here so you can see both at the same time. And we're going to select this basic frame, the regular frame we made. And it'll let us animate all these different donut shapes, but we're not really using all of these. So we can use this drop down here to select donut 1, which I believe is this one donut we had. And now you can define the circle arc. So this is where we can do some animation. So we can click this little what's it called, rhombus, this little sort of diamond shape to create a keyframe. So make sure we have our donut selected and click that. So we now have a keyframe. As you can see, it's at 0 milliseconds. And we can click OK, and it gives us our start and end values. So you'll notice these are different than the values that we see when we hover over here. But you can see our sweep is 3.2. And if you do all the math to sort of figure this out, these start and end values do correspond to this circle segment. So if we were to define this as 0 and 5 and click OK, you'll see that this has now gotten more narrow because this circle arc keyframe sort of defines the size of it as well. So just for simple purposes, I'm going to let you figure out sort of the math yourself and make sure you get this sizing right. But just so it's easy to animate, I'm going to choose my start as 0 and my end as 10, let's say. And click OK, and we can sort of position it to wherever we want again, like right there. And we'll see, again, these values sort of change. If we want to update it for where it currently is, you can hit this little plus and it updates it with our values. So 264 or 274. So now what we want to do is simply sort of animate that around by another 360 degrees. So if you do a little bit of math, if you want 128 keyframes, well, Figmotion lets us render this in groups of 24, 30, or 60 frames. So 60, so if you do the math, so 128 over 60, we end up with around 2.13, which means that we need this animation to be 2.13 seconds long to be able to extract at least 128 frames from it. So I'm going to go to 2.3 in our timeline here in Figmotion. The UI is a little bit restrictive, so we'll drag this along bit by bit. And you can see up here in this left, it gives us a precise reading. So we can go all the way up to 2.133, which is about perfect for what we want. And we can click this diamond again to make another keyframe. And you'll notice there's no animation between the two. So now all we have to do is adjust this last keyframe so it gives us a full animation. So let's do that. So I'm going to click here, and we're going to add 360 to this. So I can open up sort of a browser, and we can type in some math. So we can do that right now. So what are we trying to do? So 264, 0.6377 plus 360. I could probably do this in my head, but this will give us a nice precise reading. 624. So we're going to paste that into this last keyframe. And then we're going to do the same thing with the other values. So 274. And we're going to paste that into our calculation here and get 634 and paste that in. Now, assuming that Figmotion handles these values correctly, you should see your circle fully animate. So we can click play and you can see your knob fully animate. There you go. Amazing. So that's taking care of a lot of the duplication that you would have to do manually if you wanted to make 128 frames. So like I said, there's really many ways to do this. If you need something really, really precise and you want to be able to export it directly from Figma, you're going to want to sort of handle that duplication yourself. And there's a few ways to do that. But this is a lot faster. So let's click render. Make sure we're on 60 frames or whatever you use to calculate your animation duration. So we'll click render, and Figma will then do its thing. It'll go through every frame and export that. Now you could have also selected to export it as a GIF, but Figmotion due to its kind of early stages, seemed to sort of glitch out my animations whenever I did it as a GIF. So I would stick to MP4. So this is taking a while, but it'll go through. And now the next tool you want available is something to be able to convert your MP4 that it outputs into specific images, so a sequence of images. There's a bunch of free software out there to do this. You can find that with a simple Google search, convert MP4 to PNG sequence. But one tool you might have handy if you are part of the Adobe suite or you subscribe to the Adobe suite is Media Encoder. So Media Encoder will let you basically import a file and export it as any other type of sort of file you want relative to what it has available. So now that our Figma is done, we can click View Last Render, and this will open up this window, and you can see our nice and smooth animation here looking pretty good. So what we can do is simply right click and save the video. So I had an old MP4 in here. I'm going to delete that and call this just knob video, just so we have that. Perfect, saved. And now all I have to do is simply drag that MP4 into Media Encoder or whatever software you're using. You want to load in this MP4 as your source file. And now in the export options, at least within Media Encoder, I can define the format as PNG. So normally you'd have this on something like H.264 for an MP4 or, animated GIF, etc. But I want a sequence of PNGs. So I'm going to do that. So where did that go? PNG. And you'll see it gives you some presets. So PNG sequence or PNG in sequence with alpha. So that we do want alpha. I've yet to sort of figure out the details of making sure you don't get a background here. But just for tutorial purposes, I'll let you figure that out with your own software. So we can click, output name is fine. Knob, we're going to change this from knob video to knob frame. As you can see, all my previous frames in here, so I'm actually going to delete all of these just so we don't have them in this folder. Oh, they're not going to delete. I'll make a new folder. Call this knob sprites, and call these individual files knob frame, and it will basically add a suffix to each file name that is the frame in the video. So we can click OK and play, and you'll see that it'll go through our video and export that as different PNGs. We can now open up our output location and see that it's given us all these frames, which is awesome. So this is where, you do have a background in these frames, and I believe that comes from the Figmotion export. So you'll see our frame has this white background. So one thing I would recommend if you want to get rid of that background is try doing it without one. I believe in that case, it'll give you a black background. We can even re-render this and see what it gives us. But in the meantime, we'll go back to our folder, and you can see all of our frames here. And so you'll notice if you select them, there's going to be 129 because the math doesn't necessarily work out perfectly, and there's probably that sort of beginning frame we don't need. So you can delete one from either end. I mean, I would recommend the beginning one perhaps, or the very end one. Let's do the very end one. And you can sort of tune your math in Figmotion or tune your export settings in your frames per second to get this to where it's perfect for your use case. But you'll notice for the most part, that looks about center, so that's a good starting point. And then we can move around and we'll see that our last frame looks at about the end point. You might want sort of one more to transition there, but it's good, I guess, to differentiate between max and 0 to have that little bit of offset. So here are your 128 frames. Hopefully you can use those in your application. Again, you'll just have to sort of figure out this background export. So, we can view our last render here and see that it gave us a black background. And if we save that as a file, we'll also be able to load that into Media Encoder, run this export. So let's delete the other one. And let's tell it to go to another folder. Let's just call this one Sprites, Sprites black, and Sprite. And we can run this, and let's see. So PNG sequence with alpha. So I believe there's a way to define that sort of black as your alpha and be able to use that to sort of remove the background. But yeah, you'll notice that these PNGs still do have a black background. If we were to open one of these up back in Figma, we'll see it's got the black background. So yeah, hopefully this will work. This is sort of like a quick way to do it. Again, the other way would be to sort of manually make your donut chart and hide and unhide all these little circles that we made, each one having a different offset 128 times. So if you have the time to do that, feel free. Other than that, you can use Figmotion and some video tricks to achieve your result. So thank you.